We had a main event set for Saturday in the UFC between Islam Makhachev and Rafael Dos Anjos. Makhachev is out. I don't know if he got the Rona or something else, but he's out. Rafael Dos Anjos, on short notice, was looking for an opponent. Wasn't sure what was going to happen. On 5 days' notice, UFC commentator slash sometimes lightweight, I guess, or however you want to call it, Paul Felder steps in and decides to take the fight. It will be, Brian Campbell, 5 rounds, not 3.
Marbles, Luke.
I know, bro. At 155 pounds. There's a lot of different pieces to unpack here. Your reaction to the news generally.
Yeah, my reaction is thank you, Paul Felder, because, Luke, in a weird way, tell me if I'm wrong, he raised the rent on this fight. It wasn't that I didn't like that main event. There's some certain there's referendum issues here. We got to see if RDA, coming off 3 out of 4 defeats and now moving back down to not only the division that he won the title at lightweight, but the one that he couldn't make weight anymore 4 years ago. That's a story in itself. Certainly I wanted to see the rise of Islam Makhachev. Could he defeat somebody on this level? It would have been a nice win if he could. Now we get a fight that just tells me, Luke, I don't know about you, it tells me they're going to bang. We're going to see some action. This will be fun. Paul Felder, I don't always give him I love him. I respect him. I always feel like I'm saying, man, this guy's great, but is he uber elite? Man, he is right there if he's not. He pushed Dan Hooker to the absolute limit. His fights, more often than not, Luke, are very fun to watch. And this is going to be very interesting because it's not that he was out of it in terms of contention. But after that loss to Dan Hooker, he did sort of take stock of his age, his situation with the burgeoning second career as a broadcaster, and the whole idea of, can he still do it at this level? He didn't have a fight scheduled. He wasn't in a camp. Excuse me for burping my way through this. But he did, Luke, keep himself in tip-top shape. I don't know if he was training for a 209 Stockton triathlon or not, but he's got the abs. He's ripped up. And he's got the bollocks, Luke, to say, you know what, company? I'll save the day for you. I'm sure they're going to pay him well for it. Luke, do you think this could be sort of an accidental potential opportunity if he can get a win here to parachute back into a big fight in a loaded division?
There's just no doubt about it. I mean, this is what it is, right? It's go big or go home, right? Accept a bunch of risk, knowing that your chances are certainly, I'm not going to say not great, but an uphill climb. I think that's pretty fair. And if you win, you just get all the rewards in the world. And if you lose, you can say, well, listen, I took it on short notice. What could you really expect? Still, it would be 2 losses in a row, even though I kind of thought he won the Hooker fight. But, it is what it is, although I thought he lost the Barboza fight. The point being is it'd be 2 losses in a row. Certainly 2 out of your last 3 fights wouldn't go your way, however forgivable it may be. But back to the point you had raised, which is, let's say he wins. It is absolutely massive. I mean, we already know, Dana White's judgment can be questioned or second-guessed, but it is what it is. He is the guy who has a lot of say, and he really respects, as we all do, but in particular really respects Rafael Dos Anjos and the ability that he has, and he sort of uses the guy. He has said publicly, this is sort of my measuring stick for, you can beat this guy, you can do something really quite special. Now, again, beating that guy at all is hard to do, especially on 5 days' notice at 155 pounds in 5 rounds. It's just crazy that he's able to do that, to your point. I mean, he must be the king of Peloton or some shit. I don't know what he's doing in his free time, but apparently it was just getting ready, staying in phenomenal shape, and he didn't second-guess this one at all. To me, if you take a fight on 5 days' notice at 155 pounds for 5 rounds in a main event against a guy this battle-tested, who is this good, a former champion in the weight class, and a guy who has wins over contenders, a division up. Holy shit, man. That honestly might be the best win of his career. If you look at him, these are his victories, BC, in the UFC. Jason Sago, Danny Castillo, Darren Cruikshank, Josh Berkman, Alessandro Ricci, Stevie Ray. The Charles Oliveira one's very good, certainly at age as well. James Vick and Edson Barboza. Shouts to all those folks. Honestly, BC, this might be his crowning achievement if he can find a way to get it done.
Yeah, look, and maybe there is one run left in him to sort of look, he's got nice wins. There's not a giant standout one in there against Barboza. While RDA at this point seems like he's on the other side of the hill. For all things considered, like you said, it could end up being his best win if he could get it. I mean, even Connor didn't come back at lightweight, right? Coming off of that long layoff was like, give me the soft welterweight to fall back on. So a lot of respect here. And I think most importantly, Luke, on his decision-making to do this, obviously you have to be in the shape to accept it. But in the UFC, right, the quickest way to Dana's heart is not through his stomach. It's kind of through his sack, Luke. It's kind of showing him that I'm company man. I'm crazy. I'm going to, do it for the love. I'm going to save the day and come in. You do that, you get rewarded. It's how this thing works, Luke. Okay. So, Cowboy Cerrone made a career out of that, right? It's what you do. And this is going to be really interesting to see. I like the fight a lot. I mean, look, Luke, who has more questions to answer? That's the key. I mean, I feel like there's a giant referendum on where RDA is and where he's going.
Yeah, I mean, RDA, we're all praising Paul Felder. You got to respect RDA, too, because here's the other part about it. Yes, it's 5 rounds. Yes, it's 5 days' notice. And yes, it's 155. Okay, so, that doesn't make the job easy for Paul Felder. Paul Felder's not a walk in the park to fight either. And if you're Rafael Dos Anjos, hey, man, you're back down at 155. You're trying to get right. You were taking on Islam Makhachev, who was certainly a formidable challenge, and we'll see exactly how good he can be. But, you have to pivot to a different opponent on short notice, too. You want to thank Paul Felder. We're thanking Paul Felder. You got to do the exact same thing for Rafael Dos Anjos, who was out there praising Paul Felder for, making sure that the show goes on. This, next man up attitude that these guys have. And, yes, they want to get paid. I mean, obviously there's something to it. But they are both taking on substantial forms of risk here in the event that goes wrong. Yes, MMA is forgiving for losses even that happen as a planned fight, and especially on short notice. But it doesn't mean they don't count. They do. I got to say, I take my hat off to both of these competitors, and I want to make sure we say it. Rafael Dos Anjos is all man as well, and while he has his hands full, I respect his willingness to take on the risk because it's not going to work out for one of these two. And they both know it, and the way in which it can be so unpredictable is just things that a lot of combat athletes just wouldn't do.
Yeah, Luke. Agreed. Full respect to both, and certainly on Friday's show we can look a little bit deeper into this matchup after they get on the scales and see who.
One quick note, BC. I'll throw it right back to you. This is what I found interesting, to the point we're making. Odds makers. They've got Paul Felder as a very slight underdog, about plus 160. To RDA's minus 190. So not a little bit more than slight, but not a heavy underdog, not by any stretch of the imagination.
No, and it's a hard fight to handicap, not knowing if RDA can make this weight and look the same. I mean, go back and watch the Eddie Alvarez fight. Was that Eddie's moment, or was that RDA just realizing he couldn't make 155 anymore? Now it feels like he's going back under some guise of desperation, one last chance. We'll be talking to the great Rafael Dos Anjos later today, Luke, right after this show, in fact. So look for that later today. But, Luke, I want to get into the deep dive element because you found this very interesting. You threw it out there on Twitter and stuff, the whole idea of saving the day. We seem to see it a lot more in MMA than we do in boxing. When a main event falls apart, you're much more likely to get a very suitable replacement. It's rare that you get an upgrade. It happens sometimes, but you get a very suitable replacement. That seems obvious to me given the different business models and the too many cooks in the kitchen in boxing, the lack of organization, where in UFC, same promoter, same league, all under one house. Why does this stick out to you, Luke?
The reason why it stuck out is because in this age of Corona, fighters aren't fighting as often, which at first they were lamenting for different reasons between boxing and MMA. For example, you had Bud Crawford initially saying at the beginning of the pandemic, hey, man, I'm not fighting without an audience. Now, here he is fighting on Saturday basically without an audience, but it took some time for him to warm up to it. And obviously those guys at Bud Crawford's level, when you're that kind of an A-side, premier, top for pound talent, you have some command over the gate, and that's a way you can generate revenue. So, you had pointed out quite smarmily, if that's a word, smarmy, I'm not sure what the word would be, that, they're different business models. But it's true, right? I mean, the way in which the business models are constructed, they're not entirely different, but they're meaningfully different. And those meaningful differences, they drive different forms of incentive. The thing that I was thinking about is I'm all the time talking about the Ali Act or a union or a trade association or some kind of mechanism to level the playing field to a degree between labor in the world of MMA and the promoter. And whatever mechanism it ends up being, We can all debate which one we'd like more. But my question, just thinking out loud, was if you get one of those things, and I guess it would depend on which one you get, given what the answer would be. But let's say a union. If you got a union, would this practice go away? Would the days of Paul Felder stepping in on 5 days' notice, not taking the 3-round fight, a 5-round fight against, RDA is, he's as tough as they come, whether he's in the back end of a career or not. Would it go away? I don't know the answer to that. I mean, one of the keys, BC, and you know this as well as I do, one of the keys to the UFC's success is they have found a way to align their own interests with the consumers. So the consumer really benefits because what they want out of the product is what the UFC management wants out of the product. And that's a relationship that works really well. I don't know which one it is, BC. I would love to know. Is this now something that is so ingrained as a practice that it's part of the culture of MMA? Or if you change the incentives in the business model, not to the exact same thing boxing is, but a little bit closer, would this practice go away?
You wouldn't see it as much because, look, I feel like there's not a middle class in the UFC. I feel like there's the haves and the have-nots. The haves are the champions, the ex-champions, the championship level, consistent main event type fighters who get the type of pay that you can put some money away and walk away from the sport in a good piece. And it's everyone else fighting and scratching and crawling to get to that. And that opens up doors to be opportunistic. And look, this, it's not one size fits all. For all we know, Paul Felder could have gotten offered, a lot more money than normal and he's just taken it one time. It also could just be, look, maybe I do have one run left in me. Let me figure this out. Situations differ, but certainly in MMA, you're going to see that, I think, more often. Guys taking that opportunity. They know you can win over management. Management's got full control here. They're the matchmakers. They're the owner. They're the promoter, all that. You can win them over by doing sort of company-wide take chances like this. I think it's a little bit more ingrained in the culture to do that. The sport's got a shorter history run. It's certainly got a small history of not equal pay, and there's sort of that fight. You certainly see it a lot less often in boxing, Luke, first and foremost just because you got different promoters and networks. I mean, it's not that we don't see it. Andy Ruiz coming in the last minute to upset Anthony Joshua is probably the last great monster example. He was actually a PBC fighter on another network and promotion, but that was a specific big fight where they wanted Anthony Joshua to come to the States, Madison Square Garden, make this arrival and announcement, and they wanted a replacement that at least would ring true to people as having some level of a chance. And I know that sounds contrasting because we played up this Cinderella thing with Andy Ruiz pulling the upset. Look, it wasn't likely, but it wasn't like Andy Ruiz was a bum. He wasn't Rocky Balboa going in there against Apollo Creed. He was somebody who maybe just didn't max it out until that moment. We also saw, of course, Vitaly Klitschko famously come in last minute when Johnson fell out against Lennox Lewis in 2003, and they had that sort of last-minute war on HBO. That's a classic. You don't see it that often, though. So, Luke, I think it's still built into that structure of the have-nots seeing an opportunity to maybe become a have. I mean, if you're a have, Luke, why would you? Unless it's a title fight, unless you're a badass, unless you're Justin Gaethje coming in to fight Ferguson to skip the line to get that interim strap to get to the top of the queue in the deepest division in the sport's history, why else would you, Luke?
It's just the thing that stands out is, and maybe it was bluster, and who knows if it would have really gone down. But when Conor McGregor was looking to fill in, I think against Frankie Edgar for some fight, or against Frankie Edgar, I can't remember the exact circumstances at this point. My memory is a little bit fading, but Conor McGregor was willing to step in on short notice against a sort of credentialed opponent, even at an inhospitable weight class. And, there's a guy who has no real need to do it. I mean, I think you're right. You'd still see it, particularly for those who are trying to get to the UFC. Hey, guy fell out with Rona. Can you take a fight in the UFC on 3 days? And you've been fighting in, Cage Fury, not paying you shit championships or whatever. Yes, I think you'll see it there. Or if someone's on a card, same weight class, opponent falls out, will you change opponents, especially if you need to and you want to make good with a promotion. It could come with a pay bump. That's the other part, too. You could change the mechanics where if something falls out and you want to take the headlining slot, UFC through some kind of union obligation would have to, double your pay or something. I'm making something up. But, some kind of ordered mechanism by which to bump your pay. All of those could be in play, and so that could kind of do it. But I just can't quite figure out where the incentives in terms of making it happen because you're trying to please somebody in an unequal relationship begins. and where the culture of it's been such a practice for so long, not just in UFC, in other MMA organizations, you might just see more of it and more of it and more of it because, or at least continuing it, I should say, because it's just a thing MMA fighters do. I don't know. I think there's a bit of a culture there.
I want to look back at sort of some of the more monumental moments in the UFC that we've seen that. And there's been times, Justin Gaethje took advantage. Yet Jorge Masvidal tried the same thing, of course, this year and lost to Usman. Maybe the best example in terms of success is Michael Bisping coming off the movie set, Luke, of Triple X with Vin Diesel and walking in there and upsetting Luke Rockhold when Weidman fell out. But was there
Nate Diaz and Conor, too.
Nate Diaz was certainly that was a big situation, and don't forget, Uriah Faber claims he was right in that discussion until the final second, Luke, when they went with Nate Diaz. But do you think there's a more surprising one, and I'll give you mine, than Anderson Silva at UFC 200? God, he took the fight on like 2 hours' notice, Luke, and fought Daniel Cormier in the damn co-main event. It wasn't the co-main event, but you get my point. I mean, that I don't think I've been more surprised than that right there, even though that quickly turned into almost a carnival type fight with no rules and no meaning, really. It was just sort of an attraction one time. Let's see it.
Yeah, it was like the UFC was like, who could we possibly put on this card to retain some of the value now that DC versus Jones is off? And they got Anderson Silva versus DC, and you think to yourself, my God, if that's who they can call out of the bullpen and put on a card, I mean, it just speaks to their incredible culture of doing this, but also the reservoir of talent who was willing to do this kind of thing. Now, the fight ended up being weird. There's no doubt about it. But, yeah, that was an interesting moment as well. And so it goes back to these questions, like what are successful examples? What are bad examples of it? To me, the Nate Diaz and Conor in the first fight. So, or you brought it up. You could say even the Andy Ruiz and Anthony Joshua fight. I mean, that's a reason why these guys don't do that, right? It's because the A side ends up getting toppled out of nowhere, and now you have to go and reconfigure the whole division for a second. And they had to go and do the Andy Ruiz fight with Clash on the Dunes in Saudi Arabia. They had to do the second Diaz fight, and there's controversy about that. And in the end, the promotions made it work for their own respective reasons, but it causes a lot of problems, or at least I should say, it changes a lot of plans when things don't go according to plan. You don't exactly have that in this case, BC, with RDA and Paul. It could change the trajectory of their careers, but it doesn't really affect the entire division or title implications or that kind of a thing. So for that reason, it's a lot less risky. But it's amazing that the UFC is by itself, we don't talk about it this way, we keep talking about the fighters. The UFC accepts some measure of risk, but the thing that they love more than anything in the world is keeping the machine going. If you take a fight on short notice and you don't make weight, they have been very clear, BC, you're not doing them any favors. We want you to fill in on short notice, yes, but we want you to do it in an orderly way so we don't have to do catch weight bullshit. Again, it will happen on occasion if it's really short notice and they're really making a sacrifice. But in general, it's not something they appreciate. So to me, it's also a question of what is their corporate ethos, and theirs is grind the gears, baby. Let's keep this thing moving.
And let's shout out to Max Holloway for trying at 223 to try to save the day the same way. Obviously, it was Ally Quinta in the end. And he showed himself well in that moment. Didn't get the victory, though.
TV taught me how to dream. It was a life jacket. I don't think you can be an artist and not touch people.